Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bu Monica, Leah, and Johannes, for opportunity for me to share about the situations in Indonesia regarding the impact of the COVID-19 towards the workers in the textiles and about the responsibility of the brands. So my name is Andriko Otang. I'm the Executive Director of the Trade Union Rights Center in Indonesia, as already introduced by Bu Monica. And the Trade Union Rights Center is our organization is a labor rights organizations. We are NGO. We established in 2004 by the former public advocate lawyer by Jakarta Legal Aid. So our approach is basically we are experts on the legal aspect to support for the trade union. So according to the visions and missions of the organization, we work as a think tank organizations to empower the trade union leaders from the national to the grassroots level. And we also play a role as a hub within the trade union movement in Indonesia due to the fragmentation issues. Because in Indonesia, we have 16 trade union confederations at the national level and 120 trade union federations at the national level. So it's a huge number, especially for the trade union movement. So we play a role actually to connecting each other to have a common issue and common understanding. So to support the trade union movement, we providing capacity building, research, campaign, and legal services for the trade union. So we also support the trade union, especially in collective bargaining, in order to promote social dialogue with the key industrial relation actors, not only case by case at the factories, but we also work on the legal policy reforms on the employment issue to create policy changes for better working conditions. So we use evidence-based advocacy approach, especially to convince the policymakers on it. We work on three sectors industry, especially the manufacturing, in particularly with garment, textile, and shoes, which is in the labor intensive industry in Indonesia. And we're also working on the palm oil and also the home-based workers. So I would like to share about the overview of the Indonesia garment industry at the moment, especially before the pandemic. If you see that the governments of Indonesia especially see the garment industry as a very strategic industry for the economic of Indonesia. If you see the share of the export value of the garment industry is increasing rapidly year by year, which is bringing advantages for Indonesian's economy. The latest information that we got, the growth of garment industry to the manufacturing is the highest one, almost up to 90%. And the value of garment exports around 12.5 billion US dollar. So we can see the industry is the fifth largest contributor to the manufacturing, and the top four major industries that contribute to the most job creations and also contribute greatly to the increased female workforce. By total numbers, 2.6 people working in the garment sectors, which is the 78% are female who are working in the industries. So, however, the Indonesian government still sees that the performance of the Indonesia garment industry are still not really optimal at the moment, because the governments of Indonesia see that the competitive advantage in the textile product in Indonesia are still lower than Vietnam, actually. So due to the target achievement for the economic growth and to increase the visas, that the Indonesian governments encourage the industry to more quickly adapt to the industrial revolutions 4.0. by using a modern technology to increase the productivity, quality, and the efficiency of the industry. So we don't want, the government of Indonesia doesn't want to lose compared to Vietnam then. So, but the impact of the industrial revolutions is also, of course, criticized by the trade union because it would reducing number of people who work in the industries. So as you also know that Indonesians companies who are in the garment industry are also connected with the global supply chain. So there are several brands, especially connected with the Indonesian suppliers. There are at least 7 brands producing in Indonesia who are members of the German Textiles for Sustainable Partnership. The biggest one is Adidas, especially for the shoes and also for the garment. And the second one is H&M for textile. So how is actually the situations of the pandemic at the moment in Indonesia? So the COVID-19 situations, if we compare the data between the world and in Indonesia, people's numbers of people who are infected in Indonesia, it's around 62,000. This is updated by in the beginning of July, and then 3,000 cases for the fatality rates. And on March, actually, in the beginning of the COVID-19 cases in Indonesia, Jakarta, as the capital city, is the epicentrum of the COVID-19. But after the Eid al-Fitr holiday, because there are some people moving around from Jakarta to their hometown, especially from the Java, recently East Java is the new epicentrum of the COVID-19. So due to the number of the peoples affected, several provinces in Indonesia applied the high-scale social restrictions. So people's actually not really, freely. It's not allowed to freely moving from one city or one province to another province. But starting from June, the Indonesian government declared to enter a new normal phase because a lot of people is actually criticized about the situations. They don't have any job, they don't have any income, so they push the government to to taking out the policy of the high scale restrictions, and also to start to recover the economic at the moment. So that is why the governments of Indonesia decided new normal, with specific criteria applied, that only 50% workers can be active with the health protocols. So according to the governments, the situations of the garment industries, especially also impacting by the COVID-19. First is because the textile and apparel industry are centered on the Java Island. While the Java Island is the most areas with the people affected in the Java Island is quite huge. So the mobility of people in the Java Island also impacting to the industries, especially related to the logistic and the workers' mobility from their hometown to the factories. And the second one, it's impacting to the productions process of the for the suppliers, because the suppliers in Indonesia are really rely or dependent on the brand's order. As you see that 35% we are dependent on orders from the brands from USA, and the 30% we are dependent of the Europe brands. And the Indonesian textile associations recently try to approach and encourage the brands, especially to respect the purchasing contracts, especially to pay the products that has been ordered, or not cancel the order actually. Next, the challenge from the perspective of the suppliers, actually, there are two challenges from the supply side and the demand side. From the supply side, availability of the, the raw material, it could be also one of the challenges. The logistics, the storage, the permission, the safety measures also a challenge. And from the demand side, there's no order from the brands. And some brands also canceled the product that actually already ready to be shipped. And due to the survey result conducted by the Fairware Foundations, how do the factories react these situations? 79% of the supplier giving a statement that they don't get any support from the brands to take safety measures for the workers. And sometimes, and several suppliers also mentioned that they are not be able to pay the workers according to the legal norms in Indonesia. So they will reduce the rate, and 10% of the suppliers feels that they have difficulties to pay the wage for the workers. And 12.5% of factories admit that they have to lay off the permanent workers. So that is the situations and how the factories react the situations. So the risk of the suppliers, of course, it would bring an impact to the workers. According to the ILO monitoring about the COVID-19, manufacturers get a highest impact for the COVID-19 for the manufacturing industries. We got a data from the Indonesian textile associations. There mentions that 80% or around 2.5 million garment workers have been sent home or laid off. But we found a bit different data actually from the Ministry of Manpower. Mentions the ministry mentions that the total number of workers has been laid off furloughed. It's around 3 million. But the interesting data from the ministry is 15.6% workers were laid off. Around 30.8% there has been laid off without any severance payment, and only around 2% workers has been laid off with a severance payment. So we can see from the data that the sustainability of the livelihood workers in the pandemic situations is really vulnerable. So what is actually the issues faced by the workers in the field? There are top 5 issues that recently faced by the workers. Is first related to the health and safety issues. Most of factories decided to remain open because it is allowed by the government of Indonesia. But the workers feel that there would be vulnerable to infected because they still have to have a trip from the home to the workplace in the public transportations without any health and safety or without any adequate protective equipment. So, and the second one, the social distancing policy. When they are entering the factories are also difficult to be implemented at the moment. So it has been criticized by the trade union. So after that, some factories and suppliers applied different time of, applied a shift period for the workers, different shift period for the workers to enter the factories. And also, they have a challenge on the limited access for the COVID-19 testing, especially after the 8th Al-Fitri holiday. The workers come back to the factories, but the factories doesn't provide any rapid tests at the moment. So the second issue is about the job sustainability. it is the concern, really concerns by the workers. Now, many people, many workers who are working without, in the uncertainty situations. They are working in the contractual as in contractual workers. So anytime the factories, the suppliers can be not continue the contract for the workers. So there's no certainty, and most of the workers concerns about the situations, especially if the factories doesn't continue the contract, they don't get any severance payment from that. And the third issue is the wage cut. We just heard from factories from the trade union in the West Java, in the Bandung area district. There is one factory is intimidating the trade union actually to that they encourage the trade union to to be agreed with the proposal of the company. They want to change the contract status of the workers, become a casual workers. So so with the case as a casual workers, they will be paid as a daily workers. So if they don't want, if the trade union doesn't agree with the proposal of the factories, they will not pay the salary of the workers in that month. So that's kind of intimidations are actually real in the field, and there's a challenge for the trade union. So the fourth is about the social security membership, because many factories are not paying the social security membership for the workers, and many factories, many suppliers have reasons that it's because of COVID-19. And due to the large-scale restrictions, a lot of sexual harassment issues raising in Indonesia at the moment, not only in the workplace but also at home actually. And the second, as a case study, we would like to share to you at the Sukabumi district. Sukabumi district is one of the center of the garment industry in Indonesia. The labor department at the Sukabumi district per April mentions that already around 7,000 workers from 9 garment companies has been dismissed or furloughed their workers, send back home the workers without any unpaid leave, without any paid leave until undetermined deadline. So this is the picture that the demonstrations organized by the trade union in the factories after the factories giving announcement that there will be furlough without undetermined deadline. So this is the snapshot, 3,000, 5,000 workers working in these factories, and 80% are female. The problem is this factory is a member of Better Work Indonesia and also the German partnership. So, okay. So now we are starting in the new normal. So how is the situations in the new normal phase? Per June 2020, President Indonesia, Jokowi, already determined that Indonesia would soon the new normal after the 3 months large scale with the strict criteria and requirements. Only 50% employee can be active with a strict health protocols. But in the reality, in the garment industry, full of workers actually working without any different times, different times of working. So even though in the paper the government mentions only 50% employee can be active, but the reality is not. And 72% the government workers state that the company doesn't provide any rapid tests or swab tests, and 75% workers mentions that the company or the suppliers doesn't facilitate the adequate food nutrition in the workplace. So for your information, some factories were not providing the workers some food So they have to buy by themselves outside the factories, and they eat inside the factories. So after the pandemic, there's no change. Even though if the company previously provided them food for the workers, but it's not really proper with the pandemic situations. So that is why Indonesian trade union demand on because of the health and safety issues, the trade union demands, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, that workers can get off or get a holiday, but with a full payment, because it's fully the responsibility of the suppliers in the pandemic situations. But also the demands to the suppliers to pay the social security contributions, and also demand the suppliers to provide an adequate personal protective equipment by the factories, and also for the workers who get laid off, the suppliers pay the severance payment actually according to the labor law. So how is the governments of Indonesia response about to the facts related to the facts that a big numbers of workers get laid off or sent back home or furloughed? So to anticipate the economic impact cause of the pandemic, the government has designed a various incentive package for the affected workers and the poor families. But the problem is only one program provided by the government of Indonesia targeted to the affected workers because of the pandemic, which is the pre-employment card or pre-work card. To the pre-employment card, workers who get laid off can get a cash incentive around 600,000 rupiah, or around 40 US dollar per month during for the next 4 months. And they also get some facilitated to get an training by the government. But on May, or in the beginning of June, I think it's June, the government of Indonesia decided to stop the program because a lot of critics from the trade union and also from the civil society related to the training program provided by the government, because there's some indications of corruption and collusions in the programs on that. So, and also about the concerns about the quality of the training program for the decided by the government. And the others program, it's targeted to the poor families. But the problems, the workers who just get laid off, they don't include to the not include as in the data as a poor families that provided by the government. So the peoples or the workers affected have not been included in the data, so they don't get any access to access the program that provided by the government. So that is the challenge actually, and the questions is about who should take the responsibility in these situations. We saw that there are key stakeholders should take responsibility of the situations, because this is a crisis situations, and the workers also facing a crisis due to the sustainability of the livelihood of the workers and the families. So we demand for the brands to responsible towards the purchasing practices, should be transparent and conducting a social dialogue with the trade union, because the trade union in Indonesia doesn't really know at the moment about the strategic plan from the brands after the pandemic situations. Even though we heard from the Better Work, for example, Indonesia as a multi-stakeholders initiative, that some brands also facing difficult situations, but we doesn't any clear explanations from the brands directly about their what their challenge, what their obstacles, and what is actually their plan. So it is an important, the transparency is important for us actually to how to to overcome this kind of challenge. And the government's also important that the government's also providing social assistance, especially a cash transfer, because this is the thing that the workers need at the moment. Because for the workers who are working in the city, they don't have any land. They cannot be farm anything that can be eaten actually. So most of the workers facing food crisis at the moment. So they are really dependent on the sometimes they're depending on the government social assistance or food assistance from the private sector or from the rich people. And the factories, for the suppliers, we demand on that they should providing the proper personal protective equipment regularly, mostly for the rapid test and swab tests for the workers if needed. And we also demand that they are providing any food for the workers do these pandemic situations, because the nutrition is very important for us as a mitigations or as a preventive actions to not to get affected by the COVID-19. And we also demand that there's a transparency social dialogue and a good faith social dialogue from the suppliers to the trade union with the trade union before they're making any decisions to respond to this kind of situations. So that is so thank you, and we hope that you can support us to protect the workers in the crisis situations. Thank you. So I giving back to Leah.
So are there any questions? Thank you very much, Andriko. This makes me sad to hear about the many people just dismissed and with no future in the next, also no idea of the next future, how they will survive and how they can get on. I will ask the people for the general discussion to wait until later. But are there some questions for understanding at the moment? I don't see anything in the chat. So I would first ask Johannes Norpoth to continue, and then we have enough time to discuss about the situation and how we can contribute to get the things better. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. I will share my presentation then. Just give me a second. And yes. Yeah, thank you for having the opportunity to speak also at this online seminar and to maybe provide a little bit an input on how civil society actors within the partnership view the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on garment workers and the responsibility of companies. Before I start with the thematic input, let me briefly give you an input on Femnet, the civil society organization that I'm working for. It's a women's rights organization founded in 2007. It focuses on women in the garment industry and is a member of the Clean Clothes campaign. And its three main areas of work include campaigning and advocacy, education and counseling, and solidarity work with partner organizations, primarily in Bangladesh and India. But through the work in the partnership, we've been also working with and very happily working with Andriko Otang and his organization, Trade Union Rights Center in Indonesia. So I've mentioned the German partnership already, and Andriko Otang has mentioned it as well. So maybe to those who are not so familiar with the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles, It was founded in 2014 as one of the reactions to the Rana Plaza collapse, and it is, I think you could say, a brainchild of Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, Dr. Gerd Müller. It is a voluntary multi-stakeholder initiative, including members from the sides of business, NGOs, trade unions, standard organizations, and ministries of the German federal government. At the moment, we have 80 businesses that are members of the partnership, and they represent about 46% of the German market, which gives the partnership quite some leverage, as it represents an important part of an important market for textiles in Europe. The partnership works or is relying on three pillars of work. It's about individual responsibility of each member. It seeks to ensure collective engagement of its members to ensure that improvements with regard to social and environmental standards and conditions in production countries really come to bear, and it seeks to ensure mutual support among the members through building a learning and dialogue platform. If we look now at the situation of the COVID-19 crisis, I don't want to repeat basically what Andriko already mentioned with his presentation on Indonesia, but maybe just to underline that we do see really severe impacts in all major production countries. We have seen that as the crisis unfolded, and especially after lockdowns were announced in basically all European countries and North American countries, that brands have responded by order cancellations, and suppliers in production countries have faced supply chain disruptions. So basically what Andriko already mentioned with the challenges for suppliers, both from the supply side and demand side, these challenges are really severe. We learn a lot about factory closures and factories running on lower capacity in basically all production countries. There are increasing reports of layoffs and mass dismissals of workers, and I think for the last 3 to 4 months, workers have been faced with, in part, really tremendous wage cuts. And in all this, you need to consider that this happens in countries that do not have any, or at least not a full social security net. I think what Andriko mentioned about Indonesia, that there is some kind of social security provided by the state, but it has severe gaps compared to other production countries such as Bangladesh. Still, I would say the slightly better case in Bangladesh, there's basically no social security for workers at all. And we see the situation with wage cuts and layoffs and dismissals in production countries where workers have received over the past years always wages that are below subsistence. And so there are no savings of workers which immediately face hunger right after these wage cuts or dismissals occur. We see that the severe impacts are even stronger on those groups of workers which are already marginalized before. So we see especially severe impacts on home-based workers, on migrant workers, on workers with non-permanent contracts, as Andriko Otang already mentioned. And there's a severe gendered impact of COVID-19 as well. Andriko Otang mentioned quite well the dual risk that workers are facing. So on the one hand, they really depend on their jobs in order to survive, and at the same time, going to their jobs means being exposed to significant health risks. And increasingly during the last weeks, we see that at the pretext of the COVID-19 crisis, there are cases of anti-union discrimination. And while this occurred first, I would say, in Myanmar and Cambodia, we hear now from such cases in almost all production countries. And another quite worrying fact is that some production countries react to this COVID-19 crisis by making changes to their labor laws in a way that they, for example, increase the allowed working hours far beyond what is allowed by international labor standards, and in parts cut rules about payment for overtime and other areas of labor law. And these kind of reforms would actually go against international standards. So basically, the COVID-19 crisis is really showing a very dreadful picture for labor standards in the garment industry that was already very known to be a high-risk sector for violations of labor rights. And if we look at what is actually the root cause for a lot of these violations and problems in the garment industry, I think the COVID-19 crisis can be seen to unearth that unfair purchasing practices and unsustainable business models are in part at the heart of the whole problem. In terms of unfair purchasing practices, it is especially problematic that a lot of brands have resorted to massive order cancellations towards their suppliers as an immediate measure when they were faced with the closure of their shops in Europe and America. In terms of numbers, especially in the Manufacturers Association from Bangladesh has provided numbers on the extent of order cancellations that occurred. According to recent numbers published in the Daily Star by the BGMEA, there were 1,931 brands that shifted $3.7 billion of losses towards their suppliers in the recent months by canceling orders or delaying payments. And about $100 million come from German brands, and according to their list, it's about 150 German buyers also involved in this. What does this order cancellations do with countries like Bangladesh and suppliers there and garment workers? So we see that brands are basically unilaterally dictating such cancellations and discounts and delayed payments on their suppliers, even if this might not even be legal under contract terms and law of contracts applicable to these contracts. And suppliers are in a quite helpless situation. They depend on the orders to maintain their workflow and their liquidity, so they don't dare to protest. But at the same time, they are basically left without the necessary money to pay workers' wages. And so, in fact, what seems to be quite a technical matter of simply a buying contract between a supplier and between a buyer and a supplier has a severe impact on workers' wages and livelihoods, and it's apparently the last consideration that was made in this context. And from civil society perspective, this is a clear evidence of a lack of human rights due diligence conducted by brands. In general, this whole crisis seems to show that current business models fail to sustain sudden shocks such as COVID-19. Brands are really also in a difficult situation with their with being unable to sell any of their products to consumers, and their business models often rely on massive turnover being made constantly, and without being able to do so, their business models are in really dire situation within very short time. Which I think is also indicative that we are faced with an industry that has a massive problem of overproduction and hyper competition. So we read that general conclusions by other commentators on this crisis have been that the livelihoods of thousands of workers are shaped by the volatility of the global market, and the unpredictability of the pandemic has pushed them to their wits' end. And yeah, I'll leave it to that, and I'm happy to share the slides afterwards with links to studies and further material to deeper into these questions. But I think looking at this crisis, there's also a possibility to draw lessons. I think it's a kind of good step forward that it's been more and more accepted that fair purchasing practices need to be part of how we build back better after this crisis. So there's a clear demand that brands need to revise their purchasing practices and consider how they themselves contribute to risks to wages and livelihoods of workers through their purchasing practices. There's also a stronger focus on the need for social dialogue, and that this social dialogue might need to include a dialogue between brands, suppliers, and trade unions, and that these three groups actually need to consider each other as long-term partners in order to build risk-resilient supply chains. There's a strong focus on needing to collaborate and to have a meaningful stakeholder engagement, and that brands in this collaboration and stakeholder engagement should always also express support to building social protection systems in production countries. However, building social protection systems in production countries also indicates that there's a role for the state to play. So basically, states such as Germany should help to develop robust social protection systems in production countries. And at the same time, states such as Germany or even the EU should also consider to make due diligence mandatory, so that it's not up to the brands that are like willingly seeing these ways to more responsible business practices are the ones doing all the work, but this becomes a general obligation for all companies. The question is then, are we getting there? Are we getting to this new kind of building back better or new normal after COVID-19? And the conclusion so far could be that yes, there are initial steps towards a better new normal, but we need action and accountability and not only words and promises in that regard. There has been a joint statement by a number of multi-stakeholder initiatives engaged in responsible business conduct in the garment industry. And this MSI statement, which has also been signed by the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles, calls for responsible purchasing practices. And the partnership has, based on this call, developed guidelines for responsible purchasing practices. Which is a good step, but the important step now is that companies, especially also the companies that are part of the partnership, actually commit to these purchasing practices publicly, and maybe also include further action on this. So, for example, we might need more precise rules on responsible exit policies if companies are reducing their orders right now, which might impact on workers that get laid off or retrenched. There's also been collaboration of different MSIs by sending, for example, a joint letter to the Indian Prime Minister Modi, calling him to not enact those revisions of the Indian labor law that I mentioned earlier. And with regard to the call for brands, that brands should foster social dialogue, we also see developments in that area with a statement of Cambodian garment unions that might be signed now by brands and some suppliers that basically ensures a framework of a common action of these three groups on how to address the COVID-19 crisis, and a similar kind of framework has already been developed in Myanmar. And we also see a recognition for the role of states. So there is an ILO call to action which focuses on the role also of state actors and international financial institutions to support finances to build social security systems in developing countries, and their first example of such support also being given by the EU and also the German government. And at the same time, there's also a stronger recognition because of this crisis that there's a need to make due diligence mandatory, with the EU Commissioner for Justice mentioning that the EU will develop a legislative proposal in that regard in the coming year. And just recently, this has also been confirmed by relevant ministries of the German government that they will be working on mandatory human rights due diligence as well. But as I mentioned, the question is still, are we really getting there? These are to a large degree only first steps, and we still need to see that these steps are actually brought into action by brands. And I think especially to the persons now involved in this webinar, it's good to show further support and to make sure that we get there. And one way to get there is to stay informed about brands' behavior. And I shared two links here that I think give a good idea, and will be giving further ideas in the coming months on what brands actually do in terms of making sure that workers receive their wages despite the crisis. And it's also good to make further appeals to brands to for example, by sharing the appeal made available by the campaign by the Clean Clothes campaign. And since making human rights due diligence mandatory for all brands, it's also important to appeal to policymakers so that a supply chain law becomes a reality, and we could all support this by signing a petition on initiative for a supply chain law. But a lot of these steps are rather focusing on changing a post-COVID-19 perspective, but at the same time, at the moment, we also need emergency relief to make sure that workers that are impacted by the COVID-19 crisis right now receive support. And then with that, I give also the floor to Leah, who will provide further information on that, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards.
Yes, thank you very much, Johannes, for this input. And yeah, you've been talking about the long-term solutions and creating the post-COVID-19 ideal just fashion industry. But you also mentioned that there are some short-term solutions needed. And I'm gonna share some information on the Femnet Emergency Fund with you right now. One moment, I'm gonna share my screen for that. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, yeah, as we heard, a lot of workers, or most textile workers, in fact, are living from paycheck to paycheck because of the incredibly low wages in normal circumstances. And now, because of the crisis, they're facing extreme hardship, and therefore Femnet has set up an emergency Corona Relief Fund that supports the workers in countries such as India and Bangladesh through our partner organizations in these countries. And the call for donations has already started in April, but it is still ongoing, and financial support is still very, very much needed. But I just want to share a few examples of how the money already has helped to improve, or, well, at least help the worst, or the people hit worst in the crisis. And SAFE and Civitab, our partners in India, they have been distributing food parcels to more than 4,400 textile workers together. And yeah, this is just something that they usually would not be doing, because they're more on advocacy and yeah, supporting the struggle for rights. But in this emergency situation, it is urgently needed to distribute food parcels. And in Cividab also provided financial support for workers to pay their rent, and for migrant workers to finance tickets to leave the cities where they went to work in the factories, and to be able to return in the countrysides to their families. Another example is from NGWF, which stands for National Garment Workers Federation in Bangladesh. They also started distributing food parcels to more than 700 workers and their families, but they also started an information campaign to provide information material on the pandemic, on the virus, and how workers can protect themselves and stay healthy throughout the crisis. There are some images I would like to share with you from the work that has been done and where people are receiving these food parcels. And there is some information on how you can contribute. The bank details of the Femnet account are here, but I will also in a minute share a link to the call for donations on Femnet's website with you, and it is very easy, a few clicks and you can support. And yeah, thank you very much. And I think it's just really important that we do whatever is necessary now in this emergency situation, but at the same time think in the long term as well, and raise our voices for a more just fashion industry. Thank you. And I think, yeah, I will share the link now, but it's also the time for the audience now to think about your questions and what you would still like to discuss with us, and especially with the two speakers.
Oh, so a lot of questions are popping up. So I have to summarize them for. About the suppliers, do you see a positive correlation between sustainable production and the COVID-19 impacts? This is Ashlihan Memisoglu. Do you see that sustainable production facilities have an advantage? And about the buyers, do you have noticed that sustainable companies and buyers have behave differently than other companies in the situation? So, for example, better risk management strategies, purchasing strategies, number of laid off workers. And maybe together with this situation, there is also a question at Andriko Otang that more digitalization and technology would be introduced with the risk of reducing the number of workers, does COVID-19 change this or disrupt this development, or potentially even increase it? So I think you can maybe even answer these both questions together, because it's about production and the efficiency and the sustainability of production, and which is also which part maybe have digitalization in this context. So if you would like to start first, Andriko. So yeah.
Okay, so I think I would like to answer first the questions on the digitalizations issues actually in Indonesia. So digitalizations issue is raising, especially before in the pandemic situations, as the motivations of the Indonesian governments to increase the productivity. But after the pandemic, actually, we haven't changed any update from the governments or in the factories about the development of the digitalizations. But we assume, especially and also from the field, from the trade union, it would start from the shoes industry first, then it would be replicated to the garment sector's industry. So the piloting project of the digitalizations for the Indonesia government is the shoes industries, and step by step, gradually, it would be applied for the garment industry. But we don't know yet when it would be applied for the garment industries. Based on our communications with the trade union and also several management of the suppliers, they saw that the issue of digitalizations is, strategic issues for the industries to increase our productivity. But they're considering about the prices to import the machine or the technology to Indonesia due to the higher tax. So now they're in the lobbying process to the government to reducing the tax to importing the technology, the modern technology to Indonesia. So up to this moment, we haven't heard yet about any updates on these situations. And the second question is about the positive correlations between the sustainable production sites and the COVID impact. And sustainable production facilities have any advantages in the crisis. So I think between sustainable, I think I need to be more understand the questions about what's the meaning of the sustainable production sites, as mentioned by the Aslihan, Aslihan. But based on my understanding, the positive correlations between the sustainable production sites and the COVID-19 impacts, I don't see, a direct positive correlations on it at the moment, because the bad practices are still happening at the moment in the field, in the factories level. For example, like they use the momentum of COVID-19 to change the employment status of the workers. For example, if the workers previously working as a permanent, the factories using this COVID-19 issues to change the status of the workers, and from the contractual workers, they changes the status of the workers as a daily wages. So at the moment, I don't see any positive correlations between the between the practices of the suppliers, which is impacting to the workers. Not only this, actually, even not only this, the other issues that facing of the workers, especially for the treatment of the suppliers on the health and safety issues. yes, that is true. The suppliers are trying to provide any informations on the COVID-19 to the workers, and they do some effort. For example, they're at the or they provided 3 different shift times for the workers to enter the factories, to anticipating many workers are entering the factories at the same times due to the physical distancing, but they don't provide any proper food and nutrition for the workers, as actually it is really needed for the workers due to their nutrition. They don't provide any rapid test and swab test, because we found a case. There are 2 factories in the West Java. The staff of the factories already affected by the COVID-19, but I don't see any follow-up actions from the factories how to mitigate this risk in the workers in the production site or the production line. So that is the update that I can share for this. So I can say that the risk management strategies from the suppliers at the moment, it's not directly, answering the question, the needs of the workers itself as the key stakeholders in the production side. So I think that's my answer. I hope I can answer well the questions. If not, then you can raise the questions again. Thank you.
You can contribute?
Yeah, I actually like to follow up on that question, because like, I would put it this way. I think even some production facilities that are maybe more sustainable than others, or maybe taking more care also of the situation of workers than others, are in a very difficult situation in this COVID-19 crisis. So we have been in touch with one garment supplier in Bangladesh, who is among those that has, I would say, a quite good relationship with worker representatives and the workers working for him. And in his case, the problem is, if you cater about 10 to 12 different buyers, and 4 of them are willing to cooperate with you, the question is are these 4 enough to sustain your factory if the other 8 are misbehaving, so to speak? So if of 12 buyers, the majority is not fulfilling fair ideas of fair purchasing practices, this might still kill your business in a crisis situation such as COVID-19, and you might be an employer that is taking very much care of what the situation is for the workers you employ, but you're simply helpless in ensuring that they get their wages, that they get their aid bonus, that they basically sustain their livelihoods. So I think this link between sustainable production sites and impacts of COVID-19 is a bit more complex than we sometimes think. It's not only one supplier that is behaving better than others that can save production sites in production countries, but it's really a matter of making this a rather broad-based approach.
So we had a comment to the digitalization that many people are not aware how much human labor is inside the garment manufacturing. And this is help for the people, because there is not so much digitalization at the moment, which can which helps them that the manufacturing is done and the efficiency will be, so the people will not be dismissed when they're suing. But I feel for myself, I would contribute to that what you were saying, Johannes. I feel a bit helpless when I'm thinking about the situation. So it was half a year ago, I decided not to buy anything because my cupboard is full of clothes and I wanted to make a visible protest. At the moment I see this is nonsense to do that because I have to buy to support the companies and indirectly also the supply chain, because the buyers are not here at the moment. Why all the German and European companies were canceling their orders because they're in trouble too, and they give all the risk back in the supply chain. And so it's also the buyer who has a part of responsibility, and it's a change of small responsibilities which are interconnected, and everyone can only contribute such a small step. So when I really think about my impact as a person, I really feel helpless. So what is your advice, you both? How should I behave in this situation at the moment?
Yeah, I can only say I feel you. I think because it's such a big problem involving responsibilities of a lot of actors, collaboration of key actors is key. I mean, that's also what Andriko Otang mentioned in his presentation. We have responsibilities of different actors, and I think for consumers, they are in a very weak position. I think it's important to voice and make clear that consumers do not want to be part of or do not want to use clothing that is made with violations of labor rights and in a manner that is detrimental to health and environment and the planet. And making that demand very clear is important, but also maybe consider yourself not only as a consumer, but also as a citizen. So I think there's a role for governments to play, and citizens have in democracies the role to tell their governments what to do.
So here's the next question to Andriko concerning the role of the government. That really fits to your last statement. What is the role of the government and emergency programs you mentioned? Cancellation of pre-work card program because of corruption. Do you see growth of corruption, and who? CSO trade unions can stand up against this.
Yeah, actually to the pre-employment card, actually there are several problems criticized by the academicians, trade unions, GSO, and so on. The problem is starting from the beginning, actually. From the beginning means that from the designs of the program. The problems of corruptions or collusions that we mentioned, maybe the right is collusions, not the corruptions. It's like they're decided the provider to implement, the governments decided decided directly the provider for this program, which is the owner of the provider is member of the presidential staff. So there is like an correlations, collusions like between the government state actors inside them. So that's one criticism. And the second thing is the quality of the program. The government spending around 20 trillion rupiahs for this program, and they're distributed to the service provider. But after we check about their programs, actually what the providers provided for the participant, for the ex-workers who get laid off, that we can easily access in the YouTube freely. But to this program, we have to pay. Actually, government pay to them but the quality actually the same with the other quality that already shared in the YouTube, because the training program is an online program that they're providing for the workers. So according to this case, a lot of demands in the public, CSO and trade unions also stand up to against about the quality and also about the collision issues. Then the government in June start to stop on it, the program, and we don't have heard any update yet about about what is the idea of the government to replace this program. So up to this moment, the workers who get affected by the COVID, they get laid off. They don't get any, any incentive directly from the government. They don't get any reskilling program, because the training duties due to this related to this pre-employment card is the idea is actually to upscaling and reskilling the skill of the workers. So after the upscaling and reskilling, the government plan so they can get a new job actually after the pandemic over. But I think it's a bit difficult to achieve it. So at the moment, there is no program yet provided by the government to change or to replace this program, the pre-employment card. So the problems of the corruption itself is the government itself actually. So that's the answer. And also, I would like to add one more point, actually, from Johannes and the questions from Bu Monica. From the trade union perspective, suppliers is really afraid with the brands, and the brands afraid with the consumer. So we really need the support of the consumer actually to support the movement of the trade union to push the brands more responsible. I think that's it. Thank you.
So are there any other questions?
Maybe I would
Franziska
also...
Benge?
Sorry, then I give it to the new question.
You should be able to talk now, Franziska.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, my question would be for Johannes. Could you repeat the numbers of money that was transferred? I mean, that was what you talked about, that was transferred back to the suppliers because brands in Germany and all over Europe didn't paid. Could you repeat this number? I think there were some billions, and Germany was had a part of $100 million.
Yes, sure. That's going back to a newspaper report that relied on information from the Bangladesh Garment and Manufacturers and Exporters Association. So just as a little disclaimer, I cannot really confirm personally that these numbers are correct, but I think what this business association of suppliers in Bangladesh does is collecting information from its member factories, how many order cancellations and delayed payments these factories have suffered since the beginning of the crisis. And this amounts to $3.7 billion US. And you mentioned correctly, according to this report, $100 million accrued to orders that were supposed to go to Germany and belong to 150 German brands.
Thank you very much.
But I think the link to this report is part of the links in the PowerPoint presentation. So once this is shared with you, you can check this out yourself.
Okay.
So much. So, Pak Andriko just got another question. Andriko just addressed my final question by pointing out the consumer's power. My experience in working in the industry shows that brands are so much driven by the speed of the industry, competition, and the supposed precarity of their own survival. Especially in production management, I have observed high time and financial pressure from the higher management. It should be common sense, moral responsibility, but what could be the incentives for the brands to actually create standards for social responsibility? That is a real question.
So, yeah, I think the question is about what is the incentive for the brands, to actually create standard.
Yeah, the business case.
I think it's if we are applying the social standard within the supply chain, I think it's a win-win for everyone, for the brands, for the suppliers, and for the workers itself, because the brands, the quality of the brands that the quality, the brands can get a good quality from the workers if the workers can also, they are really feel like they're happy to working on the suppliers, they get a better treatment for the brands, for the suppliers, and so on. So the incentive for the brands, I think they will have a good quality of the products, so they can standing out the quality due to the competitiveness from the other brands. And the second one, I think they would get any let's say call it image from the consumer that it's applying for the social standard, because I believe that in the situation, at the current situations, the human responsibility, the awareness of people about the human responsibility is raising within this industry. And if the if the brands are applying or fulfill the social standard for the workers, I believe that the many consumers or more consumers would be believe and trust and willing to buy the products of this brand. I think that's my questions. Johannes, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think I have 2 points on this. I think the problem for the consumer is then sometimes to know which is really the brand and the product that is credible enough to say, okay, this is, and with buying this product, all these criteria are indeed fulfilled. And I don't see, I think, sufficient proof of that so far. So that was my point about, I think the consumer is really in a difficult situation right now, because how to make this decision that this product is actually the one in which I'm really making a real sustainable choice. So I think until that is not really kind of clear to make, the consumer is more important as someone demanding changes in the industry. And I think with regard to this comment and question about how to incentivize brands to be socially responsible, I think the COVID-19 crisis shows actually that if you had already long-term, trustful business relationships with a equal partnership with your supplier and social dialogue with the workers involved, you would actually ride more easily through this crisis. So basically it shows for future risk resilience, there should be a strong incentive for brands to switch to a different model. And maybe apart from that, I would also maybe like to raise the critical question. I mean, in the end, the question is respect for human rights something that has to be a business case, or just something that we want as a simple baseline?
So, do you see any chance to shift the slower sustainable fashion through this crisis? This is a question showing up, and it's just fitting to you, Johannes. Oh, we don't hear you anymore. Yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was.
Do you see any chance to shift to slower and sustainable fashion?
Yes. I think there's also, I think you see that certain brands are considering to go that direction. Just one case, I find it kind of interesting. Esprit has been facing insolvency at the moment, and they have announced to change to become much smaller, more sustainable, and to also revise partly their business model. And they have been definitely one of the companies close to a fast fashion model, I would say. So you see there, with the crisis come ideas to change business models. I think the question is how do we manage this transition in a manner? How do we make sure that brands change, and at the same time, how do we make sure that workers are not left out of the change towards business models that have employed them so far? Yeah, and
can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like working for Femnet, but at the same time I'm also working in the sustainable fashion industry for many years already, and I think like the brands I'm working with, I can see that they have an advantage to like the fast fashion brands, just in terms of the way they organize their collections, that they don't have like new seasons coming in and out like all the time. But if you have a more permanent collection, and it doesn't matter that much if you sell the jeans, let's say now, like in February, March, April, or if you actually just like sell a little bit less now, but then you sell the same model, let's say for autumn and so on. So to slow down the pace of the new collections definitely helps to be more crisis resilient and to be able to stock up and not have to burn the collection or throw it out or whatever, but to sell it at another moment in time, for example.
So, another question is coming up. What is needed to slow for fashion shift in producing countries? I think this should be the last question because time has come. What is needed, Andriko, for slow fashion shift in producing countries?
Actually, yeah, it's important to involving the trade union, involving to the trade union. What is their point of view about the fair productions or for the sustainable productions for the garment and textile industries, because they are the one who are key actors in the production countries that we cannot taking out in the process. So I believe that the fairness who are in the trade union or the workers can give a perspective about the fairness and how to make the production sites can be more sustained and can be more feasible to adapt with these COVID-19 situations. I learned a lot from the workers and the trade union. Transparency and good faith is an issue within the social dialogue. So what if the question is the needed? I think the needed is the transparency from the brands, the transparency from the suppliers, to open the data and have a good faith to talk in the equal positions from the both parties. I think that's my answer.
So time has come, we have to end because I see some have other appointments. And I thank you so much having your time and your insights to the complexity of the supply chain. I hope we will have the opportunity to discuss these topics again and deeper, and to be part of the change and of the transformation. Thank you for having us with you, and have a good time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.